make sure to follow us on Instagram at Whistlethrowers. It's a great way to interact with our show. Our DMs are always open for questions, topic discussions, and more. You will be able to find our new episodes and other announcements there.
Wait, can I butt in really quick?
Yeah.
What the hell is a social media quarterback?
So, basically...
Thanks for tuning back to the Whistle Throwers podcast. It's Jack Lamar, joined by...
Jack Slaymaker.
And Eddie Tiksinski.
And we got a lot to talk about today, but currently we're recording this on Monday at 9:21 p.m. And the Monday night game has just been suspended because Damar Hamlin has come down with an apparent non-contact, or after the contact injury.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about, because I just found the video. So I was watching the game, stopped paying attention for a sec, so I didn't see it actually happen, but basically, Damar Hamlin made a tackle, hit his head on the ground after the tackle, stood up for a sec, and fell back, basically passed out, it looked like. As of right now, we're not 100% sure what his condition is. They did announce during the broadcast that they had been doing CPR for 9 minutes, around 8:05-ish, or 9:05-ish, sorry. But that's all we really know as of right now. Obviously, football's a very dangerous game, and that's something everyone that knows is aware of, but that plays is aware of. You always expect to walk off the field afterwards, and prayers to Hamlin that he's okay and will be okay after this, but this is something that, even on the ESPN broadcast, they were saying that they've never seen in their 20 years of broadcasting, and Troy Aikman's 30-plus years of being an NFL player now on the broadcast booth, he said he's never seen anything like this. So this is very uncharted territory for everyone that is involved with sports, and again, hopefully Hamlin's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously everyone's just hoping for good news out of this. I mean, it's really scary, and, it's hard to, gather words to describe emotions about it right now because, I mean, that could happen to anyone that steps on the field and, seeing all the emotions on the players' faces, as the ambulance is treating to him on the field, it really hits you hard, and it's just incredibly moving how everyone is reacting. And, I think obviously they made the right decision to postpone the game temporarily. We don't know if it's going to be played later tonight, or if they might have to play this at a later date. We don't know yet, but it's obviously the right decision right now to postpone this because no one on the field could gather themselves to play football. I'm not even sure if going to the locker room right now and they'll be able to gather themselves to play football.
Yeah, I don't think this game's going to finish.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to finish.
Don't know when they're going to finish, though. I even think the next day is kind of too soon. So
yeah.
I don't know, what they're going to do. It's for the teams to figure out, but I think it's bigger than football at this point.
It's bigger than football. I think part of our job too, whether we like it or not, and right now you don't want to talk about the implications of this game.
Yeah.
But it was marketed as a big time game. There's a reason why this was a Monday night game. When this game started, it was the best two teams playing on Monday night football this late in the season in something like 30 years.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So the NFL knew this was a big game. This obviously has playoff implications. If Buffalo wins, they'll most likely have the 1 seed. If they lose, Kansas City will have the 1 seed going into the next week. I forget who Kansas City's game's against next week. I want to say it's not Denver.
It might be Vegas.
It might be Vegas. I forget exactly who it's against, but I know it's an opponent that they're definitely favored against.
Yeah, and like you said, obviously we don't necessarily want to talk about it, but you're right. This game does have to get played before Week 18 happens, and it's sad that is the reality, but it is. And the NFL's being put in a tough spot right now because of it, but the most important thing is his health. Yeah. And that's 100%. All anybody is worried about. Yeah. So they'll figure everything out.
This is not definitely the NFL will be looking at this game. Yeah. And making sure everyone's in a good mental state, physical state obviously for Hamlin, but I cannot imagine what every player is thinking right now. Mm-hmm. And Jack, you mentioned that being in the locker room is not something that the players should need. I think they need to go home to their families.
Yeah, right.
Because at the end of the day, like I said, your main job is to get off the field healthy. Obviously, not every NFL player is going to be healthy this late in the season, but you want to be able to get back to your families. And I think right now the players need to be with them, make sure they're all okay. Because the thing is, too, a lot of families have talked about, spouses, kids, the danger of football, that they see the stuff we don't see. That's something that Giselle Brady mentioned multiple times when she was married to Tom, was that she saw things that we did not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that's going through a lot of families' minds right now.
Yeah. We have an update, like just a small update, but they're told Damar Hamlin has a pulse but is not breathing on his own. He's being transported to UC right now. He needed AED also on the field as well as CPR. So it's a really tough spot. I mean,
and that's also like, that's not an update that I can say would make me as a player comfortable to go back.
No, 100%. Yeah.
I need to know that he is 100% okay before I can even start thinking about the game and playing in the game.
Yeah.
But if I'm not hearing that, I'm not
100% agreed. Yeah.
Let's switch the topic over to other games this week. I want to talk about the Packers for like 10 hours.
Yeah.
Aiden, you shouldn't have never brought it to my attention that they can possibly get to the playoffs, and it looks like with a little help from who's Seattle playing? The Rams.
Yeah.
So that's really lofty, but
no.
So they don't need the Rams help. Actually,
Green Bay wins and they're in.
The NFL's in a very weird situation because what they've done is scheduled the game that is mostly meaningless, depending on what else happens, is the later one. All the Packers have to do is win and they're in.
Yep.
That's it. The Lions are the team that needs help. They need the Rams to beat the Seahawks, and they need to beat the Packers in Lambeau Field this late in the season. The Lions have done everything they could to come back and make this season as magical as possible, considering the fact that they were awful at the beginning of the year, that their defense was horrible, that they were losing all these very close games. All I can think about is that loss to Buffalo on Thanksgiving. You win that game, you're pretty much in at this point. And the Lions had so many losses like that early in the year.
Yeah.
Where you don't want to question them, obviously, now, because you have a shot to make the playoffs by winning this game and hoping that the Rams get away. But if you beat the Packers and the Rams win, that's got to be a very tough feeling. But also, similar to what's happened with the Steelers and the Patriots at this point, you've backed yourselves into these corners by not winning games early in the season. And this is the part where I think a lot of fans don't fully comprehend early in the season is every single game matters. You can say, oh, this loss is meaningless. For example, the Bills beating the Chiefs fans can say, oh, it's a meaningless game in like week 5.
Yeah.
Who cares? But now we're in week 17.
Yeah.
And they're both tied for first. You're going to start questioning some of those losses.
Yeah, and especially the head-to-head, like you said, like that's such an impactful game. And yeah, it's early in the season, but it's sort of like baseball too, where you miss out on the playoffs by 2 games and you go back to what your record was in April and May because those are important games, even though they aren't necessarily at where you're making the playoff hunt. And yeah, like for the Chiefs, you could look at that and say, oh, we're going to be one of the top seeds in the AFC. But now, especially when only 1 seed gets a bye in the NFL, that game is ultra important. We can look at a lot of teams and they are in the similar scenario. Like you said, Detroit and then even Seattle. It's not necessarily earlier in the season, but midway through the season, they kind of hit bumps. And now you don't control your destiny going into week 18. And it's ironic that Green Bay, who was probably the worst of those two early in the season, is now controlling their destiny going into the last week. But it shows the importance of having an experienced quarterback and someone that can rally troops because, we've seen Rodgers do this before, like not necessarily on this like small of a margin because, the 7th seed is what it is. It is the last seed, but we've seen Rodgers do this for many years through many different seedings. Like you were saying before with the Chiefs and Buffalo, like it's not just about the wild card teams. Like Rodgers wins those games that propels his team to a first round bye. And like, it's really important in the NFL. It really is. It can carry you and look at them. They were 4-8 and now they're sitting at 8-8, a chance to make it 5 straight wins and a playoff berth.
I do want to point out the one time that Aaron Rodgers won a playoff game or won the Super Bowl. It's when the Packers were, I want to say they were the 5th seed.
Yeah, they were the lowest seed.
They were the lowest. Okay, so yeah, they were. Oh, that's right, they were 6. Yeah, they were the 6th seed.
Yeah,
and won a Super Bowl being the 6th seed. Played every single game on the road. beat the Eagles in a close game, blew out the Falcons, as I mentioned last week, the Bears game on, forgetting the
2010.
name. Yeah, 2010.
Yeah.
Raji's interception for a pick six will forever be burned in my mind. And then beating the Steelers, the year after they won, 2 years after they won the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So they had a tough road. This will be a much tougher road than even that.
Yeah.
As a 7th seed, they're first going to have to play the 49ers.
Who we all know is...
Good luck winning that game as a wild card team.
Yeah.
You win that, you're either then playing the winner of the Buccaneers-Giants game. Or Vikings-Giants. Even that.
Yeah.
The Giants' defense is good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I know the Packers have been playing better, but... And again, this all depends on the Packers beating the Lions. Right now, the Lions are one of the hottest teams in football. Mm-hmm. So are the Packers, but this Lions team already beat them once. Dan Campbell's going to get them fired up to win this game.
Yeah, and, although the Lions are definitely, a little more depleted roster, and, going into Carolina for the Lions, Dan Campbell flat out didn't have them ready, but I think that Dan Campbell's a guy who's, going to learn from his mistakes and build off that. I think that's the culture that he's building in Detroit, and like you said, I think he's going to have his dudes ready for that game, and Green Bay is not going to be able to just ride waves.
It's going to be a playoff game.
Yeah, it's going to have that
I just
atmosphere.
want to point out Aaron Rodgers still has a broken thumb on his throwing hand. So, and he still he's making better passes than everyone besides 5 quarterbacks.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I do want to point out this weird scheduling that the NFL did, though, for this game. Having the Detroit Packers game at 8:20 and the Rams Seahawks games at 4:25. If the Rams win before, that means this game's basically meaningless for the Packers.
Yeah.
Or for the Lions, sorry. So if the Seahawks lose, if the Seahawks win, don't the Lions have no incentive to play their starters then?
Pretty much, yeah.
So my thought was that this Lions-Packers game should have been Saturday night. The Seahawks game's the next day, because then based off of that game, whether or not Seattle should play their starters or not.
Yeah, right.
Because if the Lions win, then Seattle says, all right, let's play our starters.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
The Packers win, then you have no incentive.
Yeah.
But it makes no sense to me to have the Packers-Detroit game, the later game, when then you would know who has incentive already.
Yeah.
Where you have a game scheduled Saturday night between Tennessee and Jacksonville. The winner of that wins the AFC South.
Yeah,
why is that not your Sunday?
Yeah, they have no implications from other teams. Yeah, I can agree with that, definitely. And, we've seen a lot of weird scheduling this year from the NFL. A lot of it was unlucky, when we touched on Denver and LA, it was a good matchup going into the year and then it fell apart. But yeah, and they flexed a ton of games this week. Giants, Eagles was supposed to be one and now it's 425. Their thought process was just to have all the games that, for example, if the Eagles win against the Giants, the Cowboys have no reason to play their starters because they're going to be locked into the 5. So they put them at the same time so that Dallas won't know. And it's
which again makes sense. Why? And that's what I don't understand about this Packers-Lions game being later than the Seattle.
Mm-hmm,
obviously if the Rams somehow win, that makes this game much more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But if Seattle wins, then the only team that has any incentive is the Packers when they get in.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I will also... Jack, I don't know if you want to touch on any other games. I really want to touch on the Washington game.
Yeah.
How badly that ended.
That's a gut-wrenching ending for them. And, Ron Rivera is such a good head coach, I thought. And, he truly fumbled towards the end of the season this year. I think his comments after the game have been a little bit overblown. He didn't know that they were going to be eliminated. You should have known, flat out. But at the same time,
he didn't know they were going to be eliminated with a loss.
No.
Do you think that he actually didn't know, or was that just more of a sarcastic comment?
I could see it. I definitely see it.
The reason why, my initial thought was it wasn't. And I sort of thought about it and I was like, okay, maybe it was. My thought is, if you know that this is an elimination game, why are you playing Carson Wentz?
Yeah, that's that's what I was going to touch on too. You did not prepare yourself. Oh my gosh. ESPN threw up a graphic that I saw, and it was just comparing Heineke and Wentz, and the numbers were so drastic, team success-wise, towards Heineke. I think they were like in terms of winning percentage, Heineke was 9th out of all starting QBs, and Wentz was like 21st, somewhere in the 20s. And it's like, how are you just flat out ignoring this? And you didn't play Wentz all year. He had an injury. Heineke outplayed him for the job. And now the season is on the line, and then you bring in Wentz? It was a completely backwards move.
Yeah, so we're not going to see an NFC playoff slate.
Yeah, no. I mean,
it sucks, but also I'd much rather see any of the 30 teams we talked about having a shot over Washington.
I completely agree. Like, Seattle, Detroit, and Green Bay are all better for their own cases than Washington. Like,
for real. I want to touch on the NFC as a whole because I think the conference is very soft with all the Eagles injuries. And I think the San Francisco 49ers, despite going to overtime with the Raiders, are the consensus clear best team in the conference. Mm-hmm. I don't want to rag on the Eagles too much because they have a lot of injuries. Obviously, quarterback, Lane Johnson, we see their impact already in them. We didn't get Gardner Johnson back.
Yeah.
Avonte Maddox. Who went down this week?
Sweat went down this week.
Yeah,
he said he's going to be back, but I don't trust the players saying that. I wait for a doctor.
Four out of the 5 guys are not going to be healthy for the playoffs.
Well, we're going to get Gardner Johnson will be back. Lane will
pretty much all of them will be back except for Sweat, I believe.
Yeah, and for
the playoffs.
But Lane is going to be
100%.
Well, okay,
no one is 100%.
That's the whole thing.
That's the thing.
And if we're going to say that San Francisco's the best team, they are on their 3rd string quarterback. And I get it. I know I've talked about that I don't like Garoppolo as a quarterback.
Yeah.
When Trey Lance was in, I didn't really love him either.
Yeah, he didn't look great.
Brock Purdy's clearly, to me, been the best out of the 3 of them.
Yeah.
Somehow. However, they've had 3 different quarterbacks, which means 3 different styles of offense.
Yeah.
And they're still 12-4, and they're still first. And they've had a lot of injuries as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they've been totally 100% healthy, but they've gotten better as the season's gone on. And the Eagles have regressed a lot.
Yeah.
And I understand that they're 13-3. That's fine. But they struggled against the Texans in October when they were healthy.
Yeah.
They struggled against Washington in the loss when they were healthy.
Yeah.
If they were as good as I thought they were going to be, they could have stuck in Gardner Minshew and still won the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And, I mean, they lost on Sunday because of their quarterback play. In my opinion, there was pretty much no question. It was quarterback play and coaching game plan / play calling for the game.
I was going to say, that's my other concern. Is Nick Sirianni actually a good coach?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, he needs his key players in, to really formulate something. And, his game plan made no sense going into this week. I mean, especially when you ran the ball, it worked. Sanders had many good carries. And Gainwell and Scott both came in and had a couple good carries. It made no sense to deviate off of the run game at all. And you would think when your backup quarterback comes in, you would utilize that run game to fortify him and backbone him. And they didn't do it in Dallas. And it worked for them. But when it wasn't working early, when New Orleans took 9 minutes off the opening drive, you were behind all game. Mix that in with you weren't getting any rhythm whatsoever in the play passing. Why get away from the run at all? And the game was never out of hand, ever. It never was out of hand until the pick 6 at the end, really. 10-point deficit in the 3rd quarter is not bad. It was 13 at halftime, but still, it wasn't out of hand. You had a touchdown there to bring it to 6. Or to bring it to 3, actually. It made no sense to me why you wouldn't run Sanders and why you wouldn't lean on that. We saw it in the Jacksonville game, they leaned on the run game to finish out the game. You could have gone to it earlier to get some points there. It made no sense.
Yeah.
And to finish, that's why I really question Sirianni.
Yeah, I don't think Sirianni had his rite of passage moment yet as an NFL coach.
Yeah.
And I think his almost 2 years at the position have been very easy. I know we were 9-8 last year, but I don't really attribute much of our success going to Sirianni. We just had a very talented roster, great offensive line, and Hurts was able to build off of that. But there have been games a lot last year where they just leaned off of Miles Sanders for like no apparent reason. And then this year, there have been a couple games where that has been the case as well. I mean, if you look at game against Pittsburgh, 9 carries. You look at the game against Chicago, 11 carries. Like, how is that going to win you games if running the ball is like your best option as a team?
Yeah, and you aren't even like attempting to utilize that really. Like, he relies way too much passing, and we come out opening drives with way too much pass attack. Like, and the thing is, you need to build a rhythm throughout the game, and it's early. I feel like it's better to kind of mix it up and start, when you're at 1st and 10, I think it's better to start with runs, even if it just gets you 2 or 3 yards. Like, I think it's better to just mix that in, make them respect it early, and then you can build off of that as the game progresses. And I mean, there have definitely been some games where he has had really good play calling games. And I know it's not all Sirianni, it's also Steichen, but he obviously has a huge say in it. And they've had good play calling games this year, but like you said, they've also had games where it hasn't really made sense. And listen, you don't get a 7-game series. Like, it's one and done. You either, you can't make the mistakes that you're making right now. Because even against Dallas, play calling was sort of your backbone in losing that game. I mean, I know there were definitely a lot of other factors, but on the offensive side, play calling was definitely part of that. And this week, I mean, it was all play calling. You only had the 1 turnover, which was pretty much your last breath. You can't really just say, oh, we've turned the ball over 4 times. Like, no, you didn't. You didn't have any turnovers until the game was out of reach. So you can't use that excuse this week.
Yeah, I haven't been able to get a read on Sirianni. Like, yeah, we went to the playoffs last year, but it was against the defending Super Bowl champions, and no one expected us to win that game.
Yeah.
So I look at this upcoming playoff game, whether it's divisional round, wild card round.
Yeah, we don't even know at this point.
Yeah, we don't know yet, but I'm looking at that to see, like, what is this guy made of? Like, can he make the right calls at the right time? And I don't know. I'm kind of having doubts because, like I said, he hasn't really shown me anything other than heart.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see because I don't know how you proceed if he doesn't have a good game, play calling wise.
Agreed.
I also want to talk about the AFC because I know we just talked about the NFC and how weak it is. The AFC this year could be stacked.
Yeah.
In the playoffs, especially at the quarterback position. Right now, your 4 top division leaders: Chiefs, Bills, Bengals, Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
That means you got Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, and Lawrence on the top 4 teams. But then you got the Chargers, Ravens, and Patriots. Those are 7. Maybe not all of them are great. They're all different levels. Mm-hmm. But even having Mac Jones into his 2nd playoff appearance, and he's played pretty well. Mm-hmm. He's a bit unathletic. He's struggled at certain points. He only has 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Like, from that aspect, okay, he's not great. He's definitely regressed from last year. Mm-hmm. But he hasn't looked awful either. Yeah. The Patriots have a lot of faith in him, and he still led them to be 8-8 with all the struggles they had early on.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like New England has been such a weird team. Like, it looked earlier in the year that they were going to maybe finish towards the bottom of the conference, and then they had a resurgence, and then, I mean, they lose a tough one against Cincinnati, they're driving down and then fumble on the 8-yard line. But wouldn't you know it, they win this week against Miami, and they put themselves in a spot where they win and they're in, just like we talked about with Green Bay. And, you can attribute that a lot to experience. They have the most experienced head coach in the NFL, without a question. And I'm interested to see, obviously they would match up with, right now it's the 2 seed. We don't know who it'll be, Chiefs or Bills. But either is pretty much the same opponent and equally as tough because you're going into a horribly tough environment regardless. And it'll be interesting because I think that they could put up a fight. Last year they got demolished by Buffalo in the wild card, but I don't think that's going to happen again. Kansas City, I think low-key could be a good matchup for them. I don't know how much they'll get offensively, against the Chiefs defense, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. You're not going to just run into them or anything like that. But defensively wise, they might match up well in that because they don't have the complete speed threat of Tyreek Hill anymore, which in that case, I would say New England doesn't really have anyone that could necessarily match up with Tyreek at all. But I think that as a team defense, as a team secondary, they could play Kansas City pretty well. I would be really interested to see New England in that matchup, and especially to see how Mac Jones plays. Like you said, he's had a regression this year, but it would be his first really tough test. You know?
I mean, it's either New England right now, the Dolphins have changed, and the Steelers do too. And I honestly thought the Steelers
The Steelers have a shot.
Steelers, there needs to be a lot that happens for the Steelers to get in. Because you need the Patriots to lose. I believe you also need the Dolphins to lose.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, because the Dolphins beat the Steelers earlier this year, so they had the head-to-head. So you need the Patriots to lose to the Bills. You need the Dolphins to lose to the Jets. And then the Steelers have to win their game. That's a lot that needs to happen. But the Steelers have done this before.
Yeah.
Where they've had this, like, very small chance to make the playoffs and still make it in on the last week of the season. The other thing I want to talk about is the NFL, as much flack as they've gotten, and deservedly so for a lot of decisions they made, expanding the playoffs to 7 teams, expanding the season to 18 weeks, has created wonders when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because now, all these teams that we've mentioned had a shot for the playoffs. As of right now, after week 17, it all would have been set.
Yeah.
Nothing that exciting really would have happened in the last week. I mean, obviously you would change your game plans depending on how many schedules there are. Jalen Hurts probably plays, but even if that doesn't really matter because the Eagles already clinched a 1 spot in 17 weeks. But with week 18, now you got 4 extra teams playing for a playoff spot.
Yep.
Which wouldn't have happened beforehand. And a big concern for a lot of fans is when you expand the playoffs, it would hurt competition. I don't think that's what's happening.
Yeah, no, I don't think it happened at all.
Like last year with the Eagles, obviously they struggled against the Bucks. Who was the 7th seed? The AFC. Do you remember? Do you guys remember?
It was Las Vegas last year.
They were yeah. So those games were okay. This is going to be so much better.
Yeah.
Because some of these teams are getting really hot, and now they have that chance.
Yeah.
And that's, for some of these teams, I think that's all you need. Especially for the Steelers and the Packers, I think you just need that chance.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll go on a Super Bowl run, but they could shift the bracket a lot and make it a lot more interesting than if you had the Seahawks at 8-8 over the Packers.
Yeah.
Or if you're the Patriots at 8-8 right now over the Dolphins. And I would say Steelers had the best chance. They'll probably pass the Dolphins if Tua's hurt. And that's what makes it more interesting if Tua plays or not.
Yeah.
Especially against the Jets, because the Jets have totally collapsed.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of people getting fired from the Jets. There's going to be a lot of talk about who the quarterback should be. I know that they've verbally committed to Zach Wilson. We'll see if that actually happens.
Did they commit to him, or did they just say they're keeping him around to raise his?
It's an empty promise, right? Yeah, it's an empty promise.
Basically, they said that he's still going to have a spot on the roster. They still expect him to be the future of the team. But if you got a shot to move up to draft one of these quarterbacks, I don't see how you don't pull the trigger for that.
I don't think the draft's the way to go for them. I think they need to sign and trade or trade for someone.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. There's going to be a lot of quarterbacks open on the market. I think that's where you look first, and then you go. I mean, they've got so many options at this point, and the way their defense plays, you've got to feel confident. It's not like the Colts where it's like, oh, if we plug in a quarterback, we'll win the Super Bowl. And I'm not even saying the Jets will necessarily win the Super Bowl. You have to compete with the Bills still. The Dolphins look really good this year.
Yeah.
The Patriots regressed and are still 8-8.
Yeah.
So it's a tough division to win in. But if you get a quarterback, you got to feel much more confident about your chances than you do right now.
Yeah.
Do you feel confident if they got Derek Carr?
More confident than I do with any of the 3 quarterbacks they have on their roster. And again, that's not saying a lot because, as I mentioned last week, all of them have struggled at certain points. None of them looked like a clear QB1 on this team, which again, the Jets had a great defense, so just being a mediocre quarterback should have gotten them in the playoffs. They all played below average. So I think even getting a slightly above average quarterback in Derek Carr will improve the Jets' chances a lot.
Their defense is so stout, too. And
young.
Yeah, young. There are a lot of guys on rookie deals, so they're bringing them back next year, and they don't necessarily have to worry about cap room in that regard. So they can afford to pay a guy like Derek Carr. They can afford, like I said before, if Aaron Rodgers decides to leave Green Bay, they can afford to pay that. They can afford to pay Lamar Jackson. So I think they're in a good spot, and I think Robert Saleh is their guy moving forward. I think that they're going to stay with him, and I don't really see... I was kind of advocating for a Mike White campaign next year, but he's sort of played himself out of that and come back to earth a little bit. So I don't see that happening at all. If the Jets are going to choose between Wilson and Mike White, I think undoubtedly it should be Mike White. I just don't really see how they can bring Zach Wilson back on the roster next year, especially in a tough media city like New York. I think that it's done tolls on him, and like we've seen this with a lot of guys, like they just can't handle those types of big markets. Like I think moving on will be better for the both of them still. Like for Wilson's career and the Jets, obviously moving forward, they need a new QB.
Do you think Wilson has a career anywhere else?
I mean, we've seen a lot of guys make weird careers in the NFL. Like Nick Foles went on a magical run, and then that's the reason he's still in the league right now. Ryan Fitzpatrick played for just about every single team in the league, like starter and backup. I think that Wilson, for now, it's looking like a journeyman role, but he's got a lot of work to do, like if he wants to get that, because that takes a lot of character and IQ, pretty much. You need to be a very smart football player.
Yeah, I think his ego's too big.
Yeah, and also that like you have to have a smaller ego. Like Fitzpatrick is never a guy who's worried about, he wants to start, but he isn't, looking to make his name in the top headlines or anything like that. But that's what Wilson wants. And like low key having that whole debacle in July, like where social media just ran with something and blew him up, like he was pretty much the most famous player in football at that time. Like having a taste like that of, the superstardom, I think it may have hurt him a little bit. Like maybe I'm looking too far into it, but I don't know. It's just something to think about because in July, the whole narrative on Zach Wilson was way different than it is right now or than it was even at the end of September.
He did eat up that story.
Yeah.
It came out. Like, he likes all attention.
Yeah,
so.
And he posted that picture with like the caption that, was hinting at it. It's like he loved it and like, I don't know. That kind of hurt him on the field, I think.
And I don't want to say that he was a social media quarterback either, but the reason he blew up so high in the draft is because of how well he did in his pro day.
Yeah.
Not that he was an awful quarterback in BYU. He still projected to be a first rounder, but the fact that he went above Justin Fields and Mac Jones will never make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, can I butt in real quick?
Yeah.
What the hell is a social media quarterback?
So basically what I mean is that he blew up because of the viral videos that were sent out. It's not that he necessarily did so well on the field that you saw the analytics, but the biggest play that came out that per day was that 65-yard bomb that he had.
Yeah, off his back foot.
Everyone knows what I'm talking about because he saw it on social media. And after that, the Jets were super high on him. The Eagles were talking about trading up to get in. And there wasn't, think about how badly that could have gone for them if they'd done that. But when you thought at the time it was, all right, this guy looks like the type of guy that he could be, and he had a great run against, I forget which team it was last year, it was like a 65-yard run that also was a great highlight. But it was these great highlights that were very minuscule compared to how much he struggled.
Yeah.
And it really covered up the fact that maybe he wasn't the quarterback that everyone thought he was. And that's what I mean by a social media quarterback. There's an example of a social media player, Zion Williamson.
Yeah.
Before this year, when there was a lot of questions about his injuries and all that, obviously he's turned out to be a great player for the Pelicans. So I'm not trying to hate on him at all. I'm just saying that if his career hadn't turned out the way that it had right now, he would be considered a social media player.
Yeah, who's a social media player in the NBA, you think?
I mean, honestly, you could look at LiAngelo Ball.
Yeah.
He was low-key one. I mean, obviously he didn't make it to the NBA, but it was low-key him. I mean, the NBA is kind of different with it because, like, they don't... The NBA draft combine and that sort of thing isn't as blown up as the NFL one is. I mean, all that stuff matters for the NFL, like your combine, your pro day, that it matters, but not to a big degree, And the NBA is a little bit different, where you literally have to go out and play and prove it, pretty much.
The other thing that's different about the NBA is when you get drafted in the top 15 picks, that usually means that you're going to have a decent career, if not be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
There's very few. Obviously, you go back through NBA history and find busts. But there's very few where you can say, wow, we totally flopped on that.
Yeah.
Just look at the Sixers.
Right, well...
You can look at just their draft picks and find busts.
Yeah.
You can, but you could also say these guys came out and had decent careers. They weren't just 2 years and gone.
Yeah.
Even Jahlil Okafor has bounced around the league.
And I mean, he averaged almost 20 his rookie year.
I mean, there's certain guys, like even Markelle Fultz, for as much hate as he got, rightfully so, the fact that he never played, he still has these 25-point games that shows the type of player that everyone saw out of college.
Yeah, and I mean, he's making a nice career in Orlando.
He's going to be a solid role player, which again, you're not expecting that when you draft someone in the top 10.
Yeah.
But that's still better than someone like Ryan Leaf, who was in the league for 2 years and then disappeared.
Yeah.
Or how some quarterbacks, like I think Zach Wilson might be out of the league by the time he's 27.
Right, yeah.
There's the chance of that happening with the way he's played. Mm-hmm. Again, there's certain times that happens in the NBA, but there's very, very small cases.
Yeah.
It's more that you get compared to the other guys in your draft class in the NBA. So, if you were in Michael Jordan's draft class and drafted ahead of him, there's like 2 guys that were.
Yeah, it was Sam Bowie.
Sam Bowie's the one that's always mentioned,
Even Hakeem Olajuwon.
Right.
Yeah.
And Olajuwon was great, but that's what I'm saying. Sam Bowie will always be compared to those 2 guys.
Yeah.
That's not fair because I don't think Sam Bowie was that good. You just overdrafted his stock because that's what the Trailblazers needed at the time was a center.
Yeah.
Which is what they said, why you wouldn't draft Olajuwon at that point, I don't know.
Yeah.
But you can make the argument that you're going for...
Wait, wasn't Olajuwon the one and then Bowie the 2?
Yeah, that's right. So, but you still could have traded up and gotten... You didn't need to get Bowie.
Yeah.
But my point is that in the NBA, you're going for the most talented players. In the NFL, you're more going for the position that you need.
Yeah.
And that's where things get tricky.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to compare Zach Wilson to like a wide receiver drafted in the same draft class.
Yeah, right.
To be compared to the other quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which it should be in the NFL because it's way more by position. But my point is that there's no reason that Zach Wilson should have gone ahead a lot of these other quarterbacks. He just did because he looked more flashy.
Yeah.
And that doesn't usually work in the NFL. Example, Ryan Leaf.
Yeah.
Was super flashy in college.
Yeah.
Flashiness doesn't always work in the NFL.
Yeah,
It
no.
just doesn't. It's worked for Mahomes, but that's because Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks ever.
And he does the little things perfectly. Yeah. Like
the way that Mahomes is able to read routes is amazing.
Yeah.
Wilson has never been able to do that.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold, who was also a Jets quarterback, drafted super early, has just started to figure that out.
Yeah.
And he's in year 4?
Yeah.
So you can give Wilson time to figure it out. I'm not saying his career's totally done, but I don't feel as good as his career as I did even last year.
Yeah.
I just don't think he has any idea how to read an NFL defense.
Yeah.
You kind of saw it at college. Like, he was very good at the level, but the competition was not as good compared to the SEC.
Yeah.
And he was even struggling there a little bit, just with timing. He wasn't as quick as Lawrence was, and Lawrence was in the way better conference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And jumped way out of his league in the NFL. And I just think it would take him finding out how to read NFL defenses and dropping the ego just a little bit. And then he can be anywhere he wants to be in this league.
And a big thing of making a quarterback in the NFL that a lot of teams struggle with is you need a solid coaching staff around them. Like, look at Mahomes. He was not one of the highly touted quarterbacks in his class, and he made a late surgence, closer to draft day in his stock, and he still wasn't taken in the top 5 quarterbacks. It was Mitchell Trubisky was the first one. And I mean, Watson was taken before him, but Watson has proved to be a good quarterback too. But one of the big things in building Mahomes' career was he was drafted into Andy Reid, and he played behind Alex Smith, who was a seasoned veteran in the league and a very solid starter. I'm not saying that Mahomes is solely a great quarterback because of that, but it's a huge factor because we see a lot of these teams draft quarterbacks that are just thrown into horrible dumpster fires of situations, much like Zach Wilson and the Jets, much like Sam Darnold and the Jets, and the list goes on and on. They fail and they fizzle out. And it's not necessarily all because of talent, because I think that when you're drafted that high, you can obviously throw the ball really well and, not your intangibles. Your size, strength, and all those sort of things are there. That's why you're drafted there. But building the intangibles and, like you guys are saying, being able to read NFL defenses, those are things that are grown into a player, taught into a player. It's so sad to see that for guys like Wilson, but another big example of what I'm talking about is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence in his first year was with Urban Meyer, who we all know is a horrible coach and did not teach Trevor Lawrence well at all. And Lawrence, he visibly struggled on the field. Like, his numbers weren't that good. It seemed like he was making a lot of poor throws. And people were literally questioning him as a bust going into this year. But he gets Doug Peterson, who's a very, very solid NFL head coach and a former quarterback who coached under Andy Reid and was taught under Andy Reid as well. And Trevor Lawrence has had really good success this year. I mean, he's really put his career back on track to where we all thought it was going to be. And, being a quarterback, a lot of that is lenient on your coaching. And Zach Wilson has really never had great coaching in the NFL. And that's the case with a lot of those guys,
Yeah. I think it's like a fundamental problem in the draft, like in the NFL, like the discrepancy between like the NBA, like where you could go to a bad team in the NBA, but you could like show your talent off and like really develop way easier than in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how you do it. I think a draft lottery would be awesome for the NFL because like it's not like a transcendent quarterback is going to the worst team with no help anywhere in the organization, and there's a chance that he could go to like a mid-level team and like really explode. But like, I don't know, like it's hard to like get in a good spot in the NFL, especially quarterback.
Yeah,
I feel like the other issue for the NFL is quarterbacks can literally transform your franchise to nothing into a Super Bowl contender, like what happened with the Bengals and Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
If you do a draft lottery, that means that these teams that are poverty are going to stay poverty. They're going to consistently be one of the worst teams, and they might not get the guy that they need to change their franchise.
Yeah.
So I think the NFL is a little bit different. There's also 2 more teams in the NFL than there is in the NBA. And there's also the difference of, in the NBA, you can get solid role players and then eventually trade for that guy.
Yeah.
You can't really trade for star quarterbacks because there's so few of them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that would necessarily work in the NFL the same way it does for every other sport that does a lottery.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like football is also not a sport where you just draft one player and your entire franchise is completely changed. Like in the NBA, it's a little bit easier, like Sixers drafted Embiid and now they are a perennial contender. Like you get one player and then you build everything around it. But NFL is different where like you need to have a couple more pieces with that star player. Obviously, the Bengals getting Joe Burrow was the key move for them. Like, undeniably, that was the reason they got to the Super Bowl, was getting Burrow. But it's also getting Jamar Chase, hiring a good coach in Zach Taylor, a pretty good coach in Zach Taylor, and fortifying your defense. Trey Hendrickson. I always struggle to pronounce the corner's name, Awuzie, I think.
Yeah,
like,
Jesse Bates.
Yeah, Jesse Bates, your safety. Like, that was key for them. And they had a very solid team around Joe Burrow. But NBA is different where the one player can change everything, especially like Cavs getting LeBron. It completely sent that team into a completely another level,
That hasn't really happened in a while, though. Like
for NBA, we need to see it happen a little more. Like,
well,
and Giannis is a guy who it is, but like he wasn't, and it wasn't touted out of the draft. Yeah, Morant, even Zion.
It is, but the thing is, Memphis was never a contender.
Yeah, and now they're a top 3 seed.
Now they're a top 3 team. So, I mean, you could even say,
and that was quick.
It was very quick. You could also say, and I know that they haven't made that far yet, but look at what Jokic has done with the Nuggets. The Nuggets were always a middle-of-the-pack West team.
Yeah.
They were never a lottery team, but they were never a top 5 team. With Jokic, they're a top 3 team.
Yeah.
And the other issue, too, is that there's been the Warriors dynasty that was a lot like the Bulls dynasty that stopped a lot of good teams from the West from getting through.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Cavs. And the Cavs were in a dynasty, but those teams blocked other teams from getting in.
Yeah.
So there was at least 5 years in the NBA that we blocked any knowledge of any other team.
Yeah, right.
So it's hard to know who the best players were because the other thing too, I feel like the NBA went through this little bit of a gap between stars. It took a while for them there wasn't a lot of undeveloped there was a lot of undeveloped players drafted that became stars.
Yeah.
We're now getting back to that era of we're getting players drafted that were already stars, pretty much, quote unquote. Like, we didn't know what they were going to be, but they had the potential to be stars, and they developed into stars.
Yeah.
When you look at Jokic was not the player he is now. It took a little while.
Yeah.
Same with Giannis. These were guys that you brought in from Europe.
Yeah.
You didn't know exactly what you had, but now you were able to develop them that.
Yeah.
Morant had that already.
Yeah.
Zion, as long as he can stay healthy, had that in college to now. So there is more of these guys, I feel like. I think college coaches have become to understand what the NBA is becoming and focus that more.
Yeah.
I think Calipari's done that a lot. I think Krzyzewski at the end of his coaching career did that, where you see a lot of college coaches, they take guys that fit their system to win.
Yeah.
Not to make them NBA players. Coach Cal was the first one to do that. To say, the only reason that we had jobs is to get people into the NBA.
Yeah.
And to make them good, make them as ready as we can for the NBA in college.
Yeah.
And like I said, Krzyzewski started doing that in Duke at the end.
Yeah.
That's why he got RJ Barrett. That's why he got Zion. That's why he changed his style of offense to fit the NBA.
I think RJ is the best player on that Knicks team.
Yeah,
100%.
easily.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, even RJ, it's taken a little while, but he already had that potential at Duke.
Yeah.
Which is scary that it's taken this long for him.
I think the Knicks finally have something.
Yeah.
Like, not something they can run with, but, like, thinking about, like, all the guys they missed out on. They missed KD, they missed Kyrie, they missed Mitchell. I'm obviously forgetting at least 3 more guys. But like,
I mean, you can say they missed Zion in that lottery.
Yeah.
You know, they all thought it was going to be them.
Yeah.
I think they have something that can get them to a conference finals in a couple years.
Yeah, it's possible.
Crazy as it
They
sounds.
do. I feel like they need to sign one more player.
Yeah, they definitely need another player and a different coach, I would say.
Oh, yeah. No, Tibbs is not the guy that I would expect to make a finals run.
Yeah.
Just because he had much more talent on those Bulls teams.
Yeah.
And did nothing with it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there was a solid... No one really talks about those early 2010s Bulls teams just because they never made it that far. But you had Derrick Rose in his early prime before he got hurt. You had Carlos Boozer.
Yeah.
You had...
Joakim Noah was a
They had a chance to go... They made multiple runs to the Eastern Conference semifinals.
And ran into LeBron.
Yeah, exactly. But if they had the power to go up against LeBron.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that for a second, that if you had a better coach, you could have beaten that Heat team.
Yeah, I can agree with that, definitely.
Because they weren't... It's not like the Warriors where you need a bunch of injuries for Toronto to beat them, and a miraculous comeback from LeBron and Kyrie to force a Game 7.
Yeah.
That Heat team was very beatable.
Mm-hmm.
They only won 2 championships.
Yeah.
At the middle part. So they could have been exposed a lot more than they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those early Bulls runs, you know, I mean, that team was incredible to watch. Yeah. I mean, Derrick Rose is one of my favorites. I think you're kind of right. I mean, Thibodeau, you didn't really realize it at the time, but he overplayed his players way too much, and that's his problem now even. And, like, you can look at when Derrick Rose had the injury up 12 with, like, a minute 30 left or something.
I was going to say right now, the rotation for the Knicks is horrible.
Yeah.
It's 9 players out of the 12, and it's mostly the 5 starters, and you use, like, basically 3 and maybe your 9th one if you have to.
Your bench players have to be able to build their own rhythm.
Yeah.
You know, and you need to give them enough time with that. Like, as much as I hate on Glenn Rivers, he's done a great job, like, with Milton and D'Anthony Melton. Like, they're able to really get rhythms, and that's why they put up always close to 10 points every night. I mean, Melton has really exploded to close to 20 every night.
But even now, with Maxey just coming back, Maxey's being used as a sub and getting a solid 19 minutes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's good. I feel like the Knicks still don't do that, and I feel like Tibbs still relies way too much on his starters, which is fine in the middle of the regular season, but by the time you get to the playoffs, you're burned out. That's what happened to Derrick Rose. That's what happened to all those Bulls teams. That's what happened when he coached the Timberwolves.
Yeah.
That Timberwolves team should have gone much farther than they did.
100%.
With Towns, you had Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
You had, I believe, was it D'Angelo Russell on the team at the time?
No,
that
not
was
yet.
a couple years before.
But Wiggins was there. Levine. Yeah.
Like, they had a solid group together, and they did nothing with them.
Yeah, and, like, obviously what happened with Butler was, like, the main storyline that broke that team apart. But, like, why is Butler the one that is having to take command of the locker room? Like, that's what the coach's job is.
I feel like Tibbs has never done that because also he had a star player in Derrick Rose for 3 seasons until he got hurt.
Yeah.
He had Jimmy Butler for half a season, and Jimmy Butler did not want to be there after that. You had Towns, who's kind of a star, but also he gets his own way a lot of the time and needs that mentoring that Tibbs doesn't give. And now he's on the Knicks where they have great players, but no stars.
Yeah.
So what actual locker room bringing together does Tibbs have to do?
Yeah.
Or has ever had to do his entire career?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest part. We talked about this last week on this show about how you need a coach in the NBA to bring your locker room together.
Yeah.
Tibbs has never done that in his entire career.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason why he hasn't gone on these deep runs compared to other coaches.
Yeah.
They need to find a way to use Jericho Sims. He is so raw, and I think the right coach could really put him in like a good backup center position.
Yeah, that's because he does put up fits with Embiid a little bit.
Yeah. And he gets like he could average like 15 boards, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
He's a really physical guy. Like,
yeah.
Even Obi Toppin doesn't get that many minutes.
Yeah.
Which I still don't understand.
And now
He's
Emmanuel
all
quickly.
athleticism, though,
He is, but you could, if you were the right coach, you could morph that into something.
And Emmanuel quickly has sort of like.
You don't think?
Well, I just don't see what he does on a basketball court. Like, I think he's kind of like Matisse Thybulle. Like, he's not as good as defense as Matisse is.
No. But he's a better... So he's like the Matisse Thybulle of offense. He's not going to bring you a lot of defense, but he could be that spark plug to get you a massive dunk to change the game.
Yeah.
Okay, but he has no shooting like Matisse.
Yeah, he needs to...
Not,
but, I mean... Like, the thing with Matisse is his form is just so ugly. Like, it literally looks like he can't shoot.
Bad.
But Toppin actually has a good form, and he shot well in college. So
he did. I mean,
like,
the A-10 is nothing to scoff at. And he ran the A-10.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a shame that tournament didn't begin.
Absolutely.
Like, I was ready to see what they could do.
And that's the thing. I think nobody talks about what shutting down the NCAA tournament because of the pandemic did to Obi's career.
Yeah.
Because that's where Morant took off.
Yeah.
Was the tournament. We all knew what Zion was. No one really talked about Morant because he went to a much smaller school.
Yeah.
And he won that first game and played great in the second one.
Yeah.
And his draft stock shot up.
Yeah.
The same thing could have happened to Obi Toppin.
Yeah.
He was obviously drafted very high anyway, but he also didn't have to play at the highest level possible for college basketball. And I feel like had he done that, his career could have taken off because he would have had the confidence to play at that level where he really didn't because the tournament was shut down. Which is, again, it's unfortunate because I feel like everything could have been different.
Yeah, I agree. And, like, the other thing is Morant's team was not going to be... They were not seeded very high. They were a 12th seed. So Morant was always an underdog, like, obviously going in. And Toppin's team would have been a top 1 or 2 seed.
They would have been one. I think they were projected as the 1 seed. They won the A-10 tournament.
So, like, they would have had a path where they were pretty much favored, first couple rounds. So, like, you could have seen Obi Toppin in the Elite Eight or Final Four, which, like you said, and if they got that far, it would have been because Obi Toppin was playing really well. So, I agree. That really, like, not derailed his career, because I still think Toppin can have a nice career in the NBA. Like you were saying, like, he needs to get a shot down. He needs to.
And you guys brought up Tyrese Maxey, and we've talked about it on more than one occasion on this show, that when Embiid and or Harden are out, guys like Furkan will step up and play like all-stars.
Yeah.
And do you think DeAnthony Melton is playing at an inflated version of what he is going to be playing when Tyrese comes back?
No, I do not think, like, I think the numbers are going to dip, obviously, but that's going to be because of playing time and how many times we can get the ball in his hands. But he's so good in his role where he's a spot-up shooter that, like, he's still going to be around 12, 15 points a game, like, strictly off of hitting 2 or 3 threes.
So
and then he
I
gets
just
a
want
couple
to
What
assists.
about Milton?
Yeah. Oh, well, Milton is, you kind of saw that, like, I mean, he was, when Embiid and Harden are out, that's where he's going to be at 15 a game. But when they're all back, like, Milton is still good enough to give you 1 or 2 threes, maybe even a couple mid-range jumpers. And he dishes the ball really well. Like, he can play the point for that second game.
I think tonight's game is a great example of this.
Yeah.
This is the second game that Tyrese Maxey's come back and he's playing off the bench. DeAnthony Melton, in 30 minutes, 11 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 of 5 from 3-point range.
Yeah.
Shake Milton only played 12 minutes, got no points, but he had 2 assists.
Yeah.
So he was playing more of that straight-up point guard position.
Yeah.
And Tyrese Maxey scored 12 points, 1 rebound, 2 assists in only 26 minutes.
Yeah.
Melton is going to go back to being that 6-man, but that's fine for him. As long as he can still, like Jackie mentioned, as long as he can average between that 10 to 11 points, get a couple of clutch threes, especially with the way that Niang's been playing.
Yeah.
Niang just scored 15 points tonight. Shot 5 of 9 from 3-point range.
Yeah.
He is turning into that 3-point spark plug that the Sixers have been looking for years off the bench.
Yeah, and we've always been looking for consistency with that, and like Melton and Niang are really going to be your consistent guys off the bench. Like Niang, he struggled with his inconsistency last year, but I think, like you were saying, he's really finding himself, and like I think the consistency you are going to see this year, where he's not going through a bunch of cold spells, and, he's not going, 5 for 9 of 3 one night, and then the next night he comes out 0 for 12 from 3, pretty much. But I'm interested to see how the season progresses with those two, definitely, because that's really what has kept the Sixers away from the Eastern Conference Finals, was solidified pieces outside of your top 2 or 3, because, the Sixers have always had pretty much a top 2 or 3 duo in the East, with Embiid, whether it's Simmons, whether it was Harden, just the duo itself. But the team as a whole wasn't at that level because of, you couldn't really fill in the solidified pieces outside of that. Yeah. So I hope that this year it's going to be Melton and Niang.
And this is a really, really off-topic random question, but is Carlos Correa not going to the Mets anymore?
I have no idea.
So,
right now.
From my understanding, there's still concerns about his health stemming from an injury that happened early in his career with his leg. My consensus is that the teams aren't worried about the injury reoccurring, or they're not worried about the injury right now, they're worried about it reoccurring. And that's a big problem when you're trying to convince the team to sign someone for 13 years up to the point where he's 41.
Yeah.
The Mets have balked at this deal. The Giants flat out said we're not doing it. The Mets have balked at it. I think at this point, I could see him going to the Mets. It's not going to be for 13 years. Yeah. Even if he goes to the Mets, I still see it happening, but there's a chance he goes somewhere else. It's going to be for like 5-6 years.
Yeah.
You don't think he'll get like a 1 or 2 year deal just to show that he can be healthy, and then he can get the long-term deal after?
There's 2 issues with that. One, he does not want a short-term deal. He wants to break bank with this contract. Mm-hmm. This is right in the middle of his prime. He's looking at what Harper did. He's looking at what Trey Turner just did. He's looking at who the Mets just signed to those huge contracts. He knows the money's out there.
Yeah.
The other issue is he's never played a full season in his career. I don't think he can bank on himself right now to have a healthy season when he's only done that like once.
Yeah.
And I think he understands that. So I think he understands he needs to get the most money that he can now and not do what a lot of other players did where before the lockout, where they banked on themselves to stay healthy and didn't and lost so much money.
Yeah. And like you were saying, he just did that last year too, the short-term prove-it deal with the Twins. And he intentionally put it in his contract. It was 2 years, but he had the opt-out option after the first. He intentionally did that so that he could play himself into a deal that he's been talking about with the Giants and Mets. And like Aiden said, like now there's just no team that's going to give him, double-digit years. And I definitely see a 5-6 year deal coming. And who knows? It honestly could be back with the Giants. Like it definitely has the possibility of happening. But Correa is still trying for that the double-digit year, $300+ million, which I don't think he's going to be able to get right now. Obviously, when you have 2 teams that pretty much backed out of it because of injury concerns, there's not going to be another team that's going to do it. He's going to have to settle for something, but he's a great player, and he can definitely help a team win a championship right now.
Yeah, I will say the last 2 years, he was an all-star in 2021. Last year, the Twins, 136 games. And, everything else production-wise is good. 22 home runs, 64 RBIs, 24 doubles. He's not known as a great power hitter, but he still has 155 career home runs. Mm-hmm. He is 27 years old, though. Mm-hmm. The Mets, I've just read a report, from a couple hours ago, the Mets are going to talk about negotiating again soon. I think that these negotiations are going to go against Correa. I think he's just going to have to accept that.
Yeah.
Whether he does or not, that's up to him. But this is sort of what is happening to him is exactly what happened before the lockout. Before teams just decided to spend all this money, particularly the Dodgers, Mets this offseason, and also the Phillies.
Yeah.
Where they just spent ridiculous amounts of money, especially the Mets.
Yeah.
But when you look at someone 27, the thought was always in baseball, 27 to 32 as an infielder, center fielder, that's your prime.
Yeah.
That's where you're still going to have great speed. Your hitting's not going to go down. You're still going to be a productive player for us. After 32, it becomes questionable.
Yeah.
Some guys have lasted much longer than that. It's happened more, I think, that when it comes to how much society has progressed for athletes, is let them play much longer than that at still a high level.
Yeah.
But because of his early injuries, we just don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And before we wrap up here, do we want to talk about the college football playoff games?
Yes.
I wanted to touch on the Michigan TCU, which, I mean, it was amazing. Like, just a lot of high-powered offense, and then, like, a steamrolling comeback from Michigan just came up short. But the play, to me, it came down to Michigan's last drive on the 4th down. The guy gets tackled, and then a late hit comes in, which, to me, in real time and over all the replays they showed, which was, to me, it was a clear targeting. Like, I thought it was textbook definition of targeting. I'm not sure how it was replayed and not concluded that targeting was there. Mm-hmm. Not saying Michigan lost the game because of that, because they still would have had to drive and score a touchdown in like 20 seconds, pretty much, with like no timeouts. So it was definitely still way out of reach for them. I mean, well, they were in reach, but it would have been extremely difficult. I don't know if you want to touch on the Michigan TCU first, but
yeah, I do. TCU's biggest knock was that they had speed, but not the physicality to keep up with a high-powered team. They proved that their speed can beat, I believe, any team in the country. Georgia's going to be hard to beat. I think I would have been much more confident saying TCU could beat Ohio State than Georgia. Mm-hmm. But the way they played, Duggan struggled in certain points. 225 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That's not great. TCU had 263 rushing yards, though.
Yeah.
That was not expected against Michigan at all.
Yeah.
And the fact that they put up 51 points against a team that averaged 13 points allowed the entire season. And TCU said, guess what? The Big 12, we're right up there. We're a much better offensive conference than the Big 10 is. We're going to prove it to you on the biggest stage.
Yeah.
They did what Oklahoma could not do in multiple attempts and beat a Big 10 team. The SEC is going to be tough, but they showed the nation what they are and what the Big 12 can be without Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah. And like you were saying, with the physicality, like, hats off to the TCU defensive front. Like, it was said all week that Michigan was going to run all over them, and like, Michigan definitely put it on them like later in the game, but in that first half, TCU's defensive front and the linebackers, I mean, they did a really good job of stuffing that run game, and like, it came to fruition in a lot of key situations, like that fumble on the goal line early for Michigan. So hats off to them. They played a really good game. And then, although the later game, Georgia-Ohio State was way closer than I thought. Ohio State put up a really good fight. CJ Stroud was amazing. Yeah. But obviously the missed field goal as time expired on the game and in 2022. Yeah. You know, that was pretty embarrassing. Like, I feel bad for the guy, but I mean, it obviously doesn't just come to that.
It was also a 50-yard field goal. Yeah, it was a tough one. In college, that's hard to expect. It's a 50-50 shot right there. Yeah. I will say, if Ohio State can run the football a little bit better, they win this game. Mm-hmm. They were held to 119 rushing yards, which that's not awful considering they're playing Georgia. Yeah. And Stroud, I mean, 348 yards, 4 touchdowns. He was amazing. He showed that he should be the number 1 quarterback in the draft easily. However, you need to be able to run a little bit better because it does become a bit more predictable. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's still hard to stop someone that's that good. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if they just are able to hold on to more possession. Yes. That's what it was. With Ohio State, they score quickly when they have Stroud throwing the football. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you give it right back to Georgia in that offense. Yeah. you want to be able to hold on the football. I feel like TCU can win the game because they have super long drives.
Yeah.
They tired out Michigan's defense super early on, which means they could easily handle them.
Yeah.
So when Michigan finally figured out offensively, TCU had a very solid lead.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't really matter that Michigan even had a late comeback until very late in the game.
Yeah.
Where if you get into a brawl against Georgia, that's not going to go. As Ohio State saw, you have to get huge momentum early on.
Yeah.
And that's how Bama beat them in the SEC championship game last year. Is they got a super early lead, so even when Georgia started to figure out, the game was over.
Yeah.
I don't feel like TCU has the strength to do that. I feel like they can win, but it's going to be super close and it's going to be stressful the entire way. Yeah. It's not going to be like this game against Michigan where they had a solid lead and then let it chip away. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, if TCU wins, it will be
a dogfight.
Dogfight, and it will be dogfight where they are battered and bruised and barely get by.
Yeah, right.
Where if Georgia wins in a dogfight, it will feel more like, I feel like if Georgia wins a dogfight, it will be by like 10 or 2 touchdowns. Uh-huh. And it won't be easy winning by that much, but it will feel like Georgia had the upper hand the entire game.
Yeah.
I think TCU has a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after the way they played against Michigan.
Yeah.
Georgia has the best defense in college football, but Michigan was super close.
Yeah.
It was, you could argue that Michigan in some ways was better. Uh-huh. And like I said, TCU ran them over.
Yeah. And Georgia's offense isn't as high powered where you're like, because like the knock was going into the Michigan game for TCU was that Michigan was going to overpower them and just run it straight down their throat. But like Georgia doesn't necessarily do anything like that on the offensive side of the ball. And if they did, TCU proved that they're strong enough to stop it. So this is I think that they have a really good shot, and it's going to be a really close game.
Yeah,
I do think Georgia pulls it out, but I think it'll be close.
Stetson Bennett as well. He doesn't get the national attention he deserves.
Yeah,
that dude is a baller. And not necessarily the same way that CJ Stroud's a baller, but he just has that heart and passion for the game that if you're playing for him, you want to win for him.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen with a lot of other quarterbacks.
No.
J.J. McCarthy, I don't think Michigan feels that confident. Obviously, because Harbaugh's going back and forth between him and the backup, whose name I'm forgetting.
I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I can...
was it McNamara? Or?
Yeah.
Cade McNamara.
Yeah. McNamara. Like, Harbaugh didn't have the confidence in McCarthy to be the guy. It wasn't until McNamara got hurt that he went with one quarterback.
Yeah, right.
So, I think that Stetson Bennett, and to me, there's more confidence behind him. Obviously, it wasn't there at the very beginning of his career, but he's proven to be that guy. And winning the national championship last year should make him a more high-profile quarterback than he is. There's going to be knocks against him. He doesn't really have the size. His arm strength isn't terrific.
Yeah.
But I'd much rather draft him over a lot of other quarterbacks who might have the skill but not the passion or drive for the game. Yeah. Or win with that talent.
Yeah. Agreed.
So you think he can have a future in the NFL?
Absolutely. Give him a shot. I'm not saying that he's going to be a starter right away. I think he'll be a lot like Kenny Pickett, where there was questions about Pickett, but Pickett has proven to be the guy for Pittsburgh after winning these last 2 games. Mm-hmm. I think give Stetson Bennett a shot at the end of the season. Let him develop throughout I think a team will get him late, develop him, and then see what he has afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with that. I think that that's where his career's going to go. Mm-hmm. If he proves it, great. If not, I'm okay giving him a shot.
Yeah, true. And also, before we wrap up, too, there was an update on Damar Hamlin. As of 10:07, he was in critical condition at a Cincinnati Level 1 trauma center. So not necessarily the news we were hoping to hear.
It's critical. They did cancel the game, as all of you will know, because this will come out on Saturday. But it's a very sad situation. Again, it's not something you ever expect to see happen when watching or playing in a football game. And hopefully everything ends up being okay. But there will now be more questions about what the NFL can do to prevent these type of things. Obviously, they don't happen a lot, but it happening once with all the safety that they have and everything. I feel like, to me, that's what makes it more scary.
Yeah.
How do you identify a cause for this?
And that's the thing.
Like the Keontae Johnson.
It happened so quickly where he made the tackle, got up, and fell down. I don't know how you can prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the scary part is. and why a lot of people have questioned playing football, especially at youth levels, when you don't have the correct tackling, when you still have developing bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the question the NFL has to come to is, can we even make the game safer? With everything they've done with the helmets, they've made it, to me, they've made a sport that is super dangerous, as safe as you possibly can. And then something like this happens, you realize that's not safe at all. And I think that's, like I said, that's the real scary part of all of this.
Yeah, agreed.
But the thing is, it could have been unrelated from the tackle, like the Keontae Johnson
Definitely.
thing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know, and I don't know how the league can go to prevent this in the future.
Yeah.
I don't know either. The NFL Players Association sent out a tweet saying that the game is not that important. We want all the players to be in the right state of mind.
Yeah.
That was 2 minutes before they officially suspended the game, so it seemed like the NFLPA was in talks with everyone in Cincinnati saying, what's going on? We want to make sure this game goes on safely.
Yeah.
Everyone's okay.
Mm.
And obviously everyone came to the decision that this game should not be played, which I believe was the right decision to be made, considering that it didn't look like anyone wanted to go back out there.
Yep.
I know Stephon Diggs tried to fire everyone up, and I get it. It's just there is this feeling of, for some people, we know what just happened, but we need to play through it.
Yep.
That wasn't the consensus among, I would say, 99% of Bills players and even Bengals players.
Yeah, I don't even think that's what he wanted. I just think he was like, if we're going to go back out there, we're going to win that game.
There is, the mentality of football players is next man up. It's always been that way. And I'm not trying to say Diggs doesn't care. He was sobbing next to him. Diggs absolutely cared about this. But I think he wanted to use this as a motivator, saying, hey, one of our guys is down. Let's win this for him. And that's commendable of him. But at the same point, I think he was also using it as sort of shield almost.
Yeah.
Use the game to hide your emotions of how you're feeling absolutely terrified to go back out there.
Yeah, right.
And I think that I'm happy that there was people that weren't in that mindset, because that's a really easy mindset to get into of, we need to distract ourselves from this, so let's play. I think the people that don't feel like that are the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not a player. You don't have that motivation to go out there to win.
Yep.
You need to make sure all your players are okay.
Yeah. And I mean, for Stephon Diggs, I'm sure he thought in the moment that, I'm sure he thought that they were literally going to go back and play.
Nobody knew at that time either, and I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
At that point, they were just suspending the game temporarily.
Right. Yeah.
I don't even know if the players knew. Obviously, you could see the CPR happening, but I don't think I didn't know how critical until they made the announcement that they've been doing CPR for 9 minutes.
Yeah.
So as a player, if you're not talking directly to a reporter, how are you supposed to know that's the deal?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and the thought that, we are lucky enough that we could watch the TV. They were going back to the ESPN studio to give updates.
Yeah.
Players aren't getting those updates. And you're not allowed to have your phone either when a game's happening.
Yeah, no.
So these players are basically just going off the information they're given by officials.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm sure they all thought this game was going to continue.
Yeah.
Until they got back in the locker room and realized the severity of this.
Yeah. And
realized that the NFLPA was talking to people. I'm sure the NFL called McDermott and the Bills as well.
Yep.
So that, I think at that point, obviously they didn't show the locker room for obvious reasons. The players needed their space.
Yeah.
But I think at that point in the locker room, I'm sure it became clear to the guys that this isn't happening. But when you're on the field, you just don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really scary situation.
It is. I really pray that Damar Hamlin's okay, but like Jack said, it's not feeling great at all.
No.
And it's going to be a very rough couple hours after this, if not days, to figure out. Yeah,
obviously, we'll find out more in the coming days, but it's going to be interesting when this episode comes out and we know everything on Saturday, but we can kind of reflect on what we were feeling in the heat of the moment, really.
I think that's the part that's interesting, is that it's happening as we're doing this.
Yeah.
So...
Which we did, obviously it's not like we expected this at all.
Yeah, no.
Me and Jack really found out as we were walking in,
Yeah. So, it literally, you guys got in here at 9, right?
Yeah, around there.
9. The injury happened 5 minutes before, so no one new. And again, we're all just figuring this out from tweets and from having the TV on in the background silently. So we don't even know the full story. No. And again, prayers that Damar Hamlin is okay.
Yeah.
And will get out of the 100%. Hospital very soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I can add on after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we'll end it there. So this episode's going to be up this Saturday. We'll catch you next Saturday and the Saturday after that. See you.